Okay, so the group goals are going to be to improve infection prevention and control competency by increasing the number of CIC credentialed staff at county health departments in Florida. There's this saying from a podcast that I listen to that says collaboration, not competition, is the key to your success. So I really want to make sure that we're promoting an atmosphere of learning and collaboration with our study group, and that we're able to reach out to one another, and also encouraging one another, encouraging accountability, and also providing guidance. So those are some of like the bigger goals of the group. Always, when it comes to preparing for a certification exam or any type of, certification or just furthering yourself, professional development is really at that core. And so the CIC exam, while it's not mandatory for us EPIs to have the CIC exam, I really do feel that this is a big journey of professional development and, gaining infection control knowledge. Also, as the group, I want to ensure that you have the necessary tools available to have, to pass the CIC exam, which will result in a positive impact in our communities with a focus on patient safety and infection control. So this is the learning pyramid, and this is in chapter 3 of your APIC text, but I wanted you guys to understand that this is how they approach learning. So when you listen to a lecture, you're retaining about 5%. When you're reading, it's about 10%. And audio visual, you're at 20%, a demonstration 30%, and you can kind of see how it increases. And this portion down here, teaching others or immediate use, is at 90%, which is why I really like to encourage group members to develop presentations where they can teach other group members about different chapters from the APIC text. Because I feel like if you have to explain a subject to someone else, you really have to have a pretty decent understanding of what you're going to be talking about in order for other people to understand it. And so as you're preparing for this exam, I want you to keep in mind this average retention rate, and I also want you to ensure that you are studying and learning in a way that is appropriate for you. While the study group is just meant to provide you guidance, by just attending the meetings on Fridays, that's not going to get you to pass the exam. There's going to be a lot of study time that you're going to have to devote outside of our group meetings to make sure you're getting your readings done, and that if you're not understanding a specific topic, that you're following up with additional lectures, whether it's via YouTube or whether it's other additional means. So our expectations for our group members, I want to make sure that you guys are coming to our weekly group meetings from 2 to 3 p.m. and that there's active participation, so that you're trying to, either via the chat box or if you raise your hand because you want to speak, that you're kind of participating with us. Also, developing a presentation covering one chapter from the APIC text. This does not have to be an hour-long presentation on the chapter, because what I want you guys to get comfortable with is reading a chapter and then taking away what are the most important points from this chapter that I'll need to know for the test, or that I need to share with my colleagues. So your presentations should be about 20 to 30 minutes long with plenty of questions in there, because questions are always fun. We have some practice questions in here. So we're getting started really early and just kind of diving in, and it's okay if you don't know the answer. That's what the study group is for. So if you're reading about 2 to 5 hours every week, there's going to be an estimated over 120 hours that you're going to spend preparing for this exam over the next 6 months. Every kind of document or contract that you've had to sign since the initiation of the group has required your supervisor's signature, and there's 2 reasons for that. It's because we want to be able to hold people accountable, but we also want to make sure that your supervisors are aware of your efforts to develop professionally and that they're supportive. Now, the last thing is, unfortunately, the state of Florida does not allow us to pay for the exam, so each person will be responsible for signing up for the exam. However, I cannot force any of you to sign up for the exam. If you're studying and you feel like you're not ready, we definitely cannot force you to sign up for the exam, but this is kind of the best strategy that we could come up with to motivate EPIs to pursue certification. And so I just wanted to provide those kind of reminders. Another reminder is the book borrowing contract. In case you guys haven't, finished filling this out, if you received books from us, just make sure that you get this done as soon as possible. I know for some of you, your supervisors aren't in town or they're traveling, or maybe you haven't received your books yet. If you have not received your books, please send me an email because I sent those out last week and they should be there by now. So if you have not received your books, and you're expecting a hard copy, you weren't one of the 4 people who received the online text, then please let me know. So the tools necessary to succeed in this study group are going to be these 3 tools down here. The APIC text, which are 3 volumes, the certification study guide, which has all the questions, and then the 6-month CIC study plan. I've gotten a few questions about the CIC study plan. We are getting that still finalized. You'll see kind of insights into what it looks like, but we're finishing the approval process, and once that's done, I'll be distributing it via PDF, but will also be ordering them to be printed so that you guys actually have hard copies of the study plan and workbook that you're able to work through for the next 6 months. So you guys will get more updates for that next week. And these 3 volumes are where you're going to do all of your weekly readings from. Sometimes I will include like an additional article or some other type of resource, which I may have found helpful. But the majority of, actually like 99% of your readings are going to come from these texts. An additional resource that many people have used when preparing for this exam is the CBIC exam practice questions. And so you're able to buy this on Amazon if you want to. And what this contains is actually 2 practice exams. So it is not through CBIC, it's through Mometrics, which is kind of like a exam prep company. And so this just gives you access to more questions. You need to get comfortable with taking questions for this exam. That's kind of the biggest thing about preparing for the CIC exam, is just getting used to the kind of tricks that they're gonna play on you and the different types of questions that they're gonna have. So that's basically kind of what this is. If you want to get it, I have used it and it is useful, and it's just more questions, even though there are a lot of questions in your CIC study guide. Another resource that I would really recommend you guys to sign up for is the Washington CIC study group. And this study group is led by Patty Montgomery, and they meet every Wednesday from 3 to 4, and it is question-based. So basically, her study group is going through questions. They're going through the questions in the certification study guide and going over it. But it's just 1 hour and it's based off questions. Our group meetings, today's different because it's our introductory meeting, but our group meetings are going to be a lot more topic focused. So we're going to focus on different aspects of chapters that we're meant to be reading. There will be questions sprinkled in between all of the lessons, but it's more so that we can get an opportunity to review the content and then to also understand what are some things that we need to review, because we do have a pretty diverse group preparing for the exam with this cohort. So if you're interested in joining her study group, which I definitely recommend, the 2 people from our previous cohort that passed, they were both a part of the Florida group and also the Washington group. You can go ahead and email Patty, and this is her email address, so that you're able to reach out to her to get signed up for her group. There are some additional resources through CBIC, where they have different types of content that you're able to review. I really like their media page, because you're able to kind of just go on there, learn about the CIC, which is primarily a certification pursued by infection preventionists. However, in the field of public health, we're trying to improve our competency in infection prevention and control. So these are 2 of our members from Cohort 1, Kathy Abusagar and Milani Dickinson. You guys should have received a little CIC paddle with you in the mail. If you did not receive one, I was kind of excited packing up everyone's books and everything. So if I did forget to include a paddle, please let me know so I can include it with your study plan and workbook. But after each member passes, I like to have them take a picture and send it to me with their little paddle. So these are the 2 members from cohort 1 which passed their exam, and Kathy passed it in April, and Milani, it was just I think 2 weeks ago, actually 2 or 3 weeks ago, that she passed. And so it's really exciting to see members from our group pass and be able to serve their community as, you know, infection preventionists that are certified in infection control. So just a couple of reminders. So this is the examination content outline. So everything that we do as a group is going to be focused on these different categories. So we're tackling each category by reading a multitude of chapters, but this is what you're going to be tested on, and these are the total number of questions that you're essentially going to be tested on when you take the exam. And so we have identification of infectious disease processes, surveillance and epidemiologic investigation, preventing and controlling the transmission of infectious agents, employee and occupational health, management and communication, education and research, environmental care, cleaning, sterilization, disinfection, and asepsis. The certification process, I just wanted to provide this as a really brief reminder of kind of what the process is like. So ensuring that you have your eligibility requirements, ensuring those are met, and then submitting a completed attestation statement. And something I really wanted to bring up in this initial meeting is once you sign up, you have 90 days to take the exam. So I don't want anyone necessarily jumping the gun and kind of trying to sign up for the exam really early on in the group, unless you're planning to do some really heavy studying for the next 3 months. I think it's better if you kind of ease into it, and then once you start to feel more prepared, or it's getting closer to the, to the end of the group, that you consider, registering then. But this is just so that everyone understands that once you submit your application and it's approved, you have 90 days to sign up and to take the exam. So, don't go crazy and try to sign up if you're not ready. So now we're going to dive into the CIC study plan. And like I said, we're still getting this approved and finalized. Just some final kind of little edits here and there, but I'm giving you guys the first look into what you're going to receive when you get it. So this is the Certification in Infection Prevention Control Study Plan and Workbook. And so when I developed the study plan and workbook, I made it so that it's themed, there's a lot of colors, and it's fun, and it's really to just get you guys to understand all of the different exam components and how important it is to understand them. And so these are some of the beginning pages of the CIC study plan. So this study plan and workbook is meant to be utilized in conjunction with these 2 texts. So this workbook is just a place for you to physically track your progress while you're preparing, and it provides you, information and guidance on how to prepare for the exam. So it doesn't have any, specific infection control information. It's really just to provide you a kind of like an outline and guidance in preparing for the exam. So this is one of the inside pages. So this is essentially your assigned chapter readings for the upcoming 4 weeks. And so as you can see, you're going to have an identification of infectious disease processes section. This is a category of the exam. And so what I've done is myself and other EPIs that have already taken and passed the exam, we've had discussions to where we've been able to kind of realize, hey, these are some of the really key chapters that we need to make sure people are reading and that they're paying attention to, and that they have really well understood for the exam, because these are kind of really common themes that pop up throughout the exam. As you take practice exams and as you take questions, you're going to start to realize that there's a lot of repetition in themes and in concepts that you need to have really well understood in order to perform well on the exam. So for week 1, your assigned readings are going to be chapter 21, chapter 22, and chapter 23. So if you haven't packed up your blue APIC text into your purse or your backpack or your MERS or whatever is available, just make sure you toss it into your purse before you leave today so that you can kind of get started over the weekend. but that's going to be the first assigned chapter readings for this week. And so the CIC study plan is set up this way throughout the entire work plan. So each category is a different color and it has different assigned readings. Here for these additional chapters, these are chapters that you are able to read outside of your weekly reading. So let's say you do really well and you finish all 3 chapters over the weekend. I would really recommend that you pick a couple of additional chapters to read. And what I've done is I've added the total number of pages so that you're kind of able to decide, oh, is this something that I can maybe try to get done during lunch, or how long is this going to take me? So for example, you might say, I need to do parasites. Parasites is only 8 pages, but I have a short break, so maybe I should do West Nile virus. So that's what the pages are there for, to kind of give you an idea of how much of a time commitment it's going to be so that you're able to really plan. And also, you are going to realize that there's things that you have a better understanding of as you start to take practice exams and do questions. And so you may realize, hey, I actually work with parasites all the time. This information is really elemental. I already know it. So let me learn about Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which I never work with, which is a prion disease. And so that's the point of these additional chapters. Additionally, the work plan, the workbook and study plan is also going to have a place for you to fill out your questions. As you guys know, you are not allowed to write on the certification study guide because we are hoping to utilize this for future cohorts. And so we're hoping that you utilize the work plan to write in all of your answers. And the way that it's set up is at the end of every category or every competency, you'll take the practice questions at the end, basically after you read all the chapters, so that you have an understanding of what you should review, because by that point you should have a really good understanding of a lot of the material. And so if you take the practice questions and you see that you're missing a lot from chapter 36 or chapter 24, hey, this is something that I need to reread and that I need to spend some time on. And that's where the answers and corresponding chapters come in. When I was taking my practice exams, I kept finding myself writing the chapters next to every single question because I wanted to know which chapters I was missing and which chapters I was not understanding. And so that's why I did this for you guys. It might seem a little extra. I apologize. I'm just trying to make this as easy and as user-friendly as possible so that you really get an idea on what you need to study and what you need to improve on. So now we're going to get started with some practice questions. And this is, okay, so I don't want anyone to get too nervous or get too worried. We're just going to do a couple practice questions so that you guys can start getting a little bit used to what these questions are going to be like on the exam. So let's get started, and just feel free to type into the chat box what you believe the answers are. So let's get started. So question 1, a 10-year-old boy is admitted to the hospital with a 3-day history of fever, abdominal pain, diarrhea, and vomiting. He and his family have just returned from a week-long camping expedition in the mountains that included trips to the seashore. A stool culture is reported with many lactose-negative colonies. Which of the following is the most probable causing organism? A, Providencia alcalifolium. Ooh, that's a difficult one. So we're going to move on to B, rotavirus, C, Yersinia enterocolytica, and D, Shigella. So you guys can just go ahead and put your answers into the chat box or the questions. So I'm getting a couple C's, some D's, some I don't knows, which is totally normal and that's totally fine. That's okay. It's okay if you're not sure. Okay, so we have a couple D's and we have a couple C's. 1, 2, 3 C's. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the D's are winning. So the D's are winning right now, but let's see what the answer is. Okay, so it's Yersinia enterocolitica. So yersiniosis is an infectious disease caused by a bacterium of the genus Yersinia. In the United States, most human illness is caused by one species, Yersinia enterocolitica. Infection with Yersinia enterocolitica can cause a variety of symptoms depending on the age of the person infected. Infection with Y. enterocolitica occurs most often in young children. Common symptoms in children are fever, abdominal pain, and diarrhea, which is often bloody. Symptoms typically develop 4 to 7 days after exposure and may last 1 to 3 weeks or longer. In older children and adults, right-sided abdominal pain and fever may be the predominant symptoms and may be confused with appendicitis. In a small proportion of cases, complications such as skin rash, joint pains, or spread of bacteria to the bloodstream can occur. Okay, so as you can see, some of these questions, they're going to be difficult, and chapter 79, that is a beast of a chapter. That one's going to take you some time to get through. Even as an epi, it can take you quite some time to get through it. All right. And also, just as a fun fact, Yersinia enterocolitica can multiply to toxic levels in contaminated blood products, and there are really no reliable detection methods to rule out the presence of this microorganism in the blood supply, just in case any of you guys were wondering. Okay, so let's move on to question 2. And one thing I would really encourage you guys to do when you're reading these questions is, I know many of us on the call are EPIs, but this test was really developed for infection preventionists. And so if you're able to kind of put on your infection preventionist hat and kind of try to think the way an IP would think, it can be really helpful rather than, thinking from a big public health or county health department perspective, since this test wasn't specifically developed for us. So question 2, the IP is reviewing the chart of a patient with a sputum culture positive for pathogens. Which of the following findings indicates that the specimen had been properly collected from a patient with a possible bacterial pneumonia? A, numerous neutrophils and few, if any, epithelial cells. B, the presence of blood. C, many epithelial cells and few neutrophils. And D, variety of both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. So I'll give you guys some time to kind of read that over. Okay, so we are getting a lot of A's. So that's really good. So when you're kind of reading through this question, you wanna break it down so that it's not as overwhelming. So what do they really want? What are they really asking here? How do we know that this specimen was properly collected from a patient? Basically, that's what they're asking for. So is it a good sample or is it a bad sample? And so we know that our mouth is lined with squamous epithelial cells, right? And so when you're reading through these answers, you're going to want to kind of think in your mind about these different types of cells and what you would find. And so for A, we have numerous neutrophils. So neutrophils are one of our main responses when we have any type of infection. And few, if any, epithelial cells, right? Which means, is there a lot of contamination? Probably not. And so for the majority of you guys put A, which is correct. Right? So let's read through the response as into why. So useful sputum culture results rely heavily on good sample collection. If examination of a gram stain of the sample reveals that it contains a significant number of normal cells that line the mouth, squamous epithelial cells, then the sample is not generally considered adequate for culture and recollection of the sample may be required. If the sample contains a majority of neutrophils that indicates a body response to an infection, then it is considered to be an adequate sample for culturing. Okay, so you want to, as you're doing these questions, try to really break it down to what are they really asking, because what I've found myself doing is sometimes, CIVIC is really just trying to confuse you and make you doubt yourself, but at the end of the day, like, what you need to find. And if you don't know right now, it's okay, because that's the goal of our study group, to get you guys to be up to speed so you can know all of the answers. So question 3, a 14-year-old boy from rural Maryland was seen in the emergency room with fever, fatigue, chills, headache, and a large annular lesion on his left thigh, which the patient described as burning and itching. What is the most probable vector of this child's illness? A, tick, B, mosquito, C, flea, and D, louse. All right. You guys are doing really good. Okay, so we have a couple of really good, a lot of A's. And so we have, basically, once again, cut it down to what they're telling you. One of the key things that should really stick out here is the whole large annular lesion, rural Maryland. So you're gonna want to try to find clues in the questions. And so the majority of you put A, tick. Okay, and with an annular lesion, what disease are we thinking about? Good job, Esther and Sierra. Lyme disease. Yes, that is correct. You guys knew that one. So I don't know if I really need to kind of go into this explanation. So you guys may just be, no, you know what? Let's just do it. So Lyme disease is caused by bacterium Borrelia burgdorferi, and is transmitted to humans through the bite of infected black-legged ticks. Typical symptoms include fever, headache, fatigue, and a characteristic skin rash called erythema migrans. If left untreated, infection can spread to joints, the heart, and the nervous system. Lyme disease is diagnosed based on symptoms, physical findings, like a rash, and the possibility of exposure to infected ticks. Laboratory testing is helpful if used correctly and performed with validated methods. Most cases of Lyme disease can be treated successfully with a few weeks of antibiotics. And if you guys are feeling bold, what is the one most commonly prescribed? You can type it into the box. Steps to prevent Lyme disease include using insect repellent, removing ticks promptly, applying pesticides, and reducing tick habitat. The ticks that transmit Lyme disease can occasionally transmit other tick-borne diseases as well. And we have some real good people on this call because everyone's putting doxy, and this is just very exciting. Okay, so annular lesions and erythema migrans. And so here we have, it stems from the Latin annulus, which means ring. And so you can see here that it occurs in approximately 70 to 80% of infected persons. When I was a scribe in the ER, I actually saw an EM, an erythema migrans, on a female, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is pretty crazy. Like, it looks just like the pictures that they show us in school. So it was really cool to see it, up live and close. So some bonus questions. So what is the time frame that it takes for the erythema migrans to appear after being bitten by a tick? So A is 1 to 7 days, B 3 to 14, C 3 to 30, and D 7 to 30. Okay, so we have, most of everyone is stuck either between A or B. So most people are putting A or B. So okay, Sapphire, you're going ahead of the group here. We haven't gone to question 2 yet. Okay, so what is the time frame that it takes for the erythema migrans to appear after being bitten by a tick? And the answer is, oh, look at me. Okay, so the answer is C, 3 to 30 days. Yep. So the average is 7 days, right? So the average is 7 days, but I'm not asking you what the average is, and that's where you kind of have to keep in mind that it takes a little bit longer. It can take a little bit longer for that EM to show up. So, it occurs in approximately 70 to 80% of infected persons. It begins at the site of a tick bite after a delay of 3 to 30 days. The average is about 7 days. It expands gradually over a period of days, reaching up to 12 inches or more, and it may feel warm to the touch, but it is rarely itchy or painful. It sometimes clears as it enlarges, resulting in a target or bull's eye appearance, and it can appear on any part of the body. And for 2, the tick must be attached for 36 to 48 hours or more before Lyme disease bacterium can be transmitted. And we're kind of split in this one. I'm getting some falses, some trues. But okay, but I had already kind of showed it, so we're just not gonna, we're not gonna argue over this one. So this is all based off the CDC website. However, I do listen to a lot of podcasts, and I know Lyme disease is, listen, there are some very passionate Lyme disease people out there in the world that have some very strong feelings about how long a tick needs to be attached, and that's, I completely understand that. If you're a passionate Lyme disease person on this call, I get it. However, we're following APIC and we're following CDC, because guess what's going to be on your test, right? APIC or the CDC. So that's that. Let's close that chapter and move on. So for question 4, you are caring for a patient who is extremely immunocompromised. While reviewing the laboratory data for this patient, you discover he has had a sputum examination for AFB, which is smear positive. The physician is aware but states isolation is not necessary. What is a possible reason that the patient does not need isolation? A, his past AFB cultures have always been negative. B, his PPD skin test is negative. C, he only has lower lobe infiltrates on his chest radiograph. Or D, his regular sputum culture is growing nocardia species. So, I know that's a lot. Just kind of read over it, let it marinate, and then put what you think the answer is. Don't be afraid to be wrong. Just put what you think it could be. Okay, so let's start breaking down this question. So if this was me, if this was Luz taking this exam right now, there would be certain things that I would kind of highlight, right? So first, let's see. Oh, goodness. Okay, well, I gave myself away. But if we go back to the question, some things I would look at is that this patient is extremely immunocompromised, that they had an acid-fast bacilli test, which is smear positive. So I'm already thinking of certain things, right? And then the physician is aware but states isolation is not necessary, right? So if a physician is concerned that it could be tuberculosis, no physician in his right mind is going to not be aware that isolation is necessary. And so you kind of need to really break down the question, okay? So the answer is D, that his regular sputum culture is growing nocardia. So Pulmonary tuberculosis and pulmonary nocardiosis are similar in most clinical symptoms and radiological manifestation. Nocardia cause a variety of human infections, including cutaneous, pulmonary, and systemic nocardiosis. Nocardiosis is usually an opportunistic infection and most commonly presents as pulmonary disease. Nocardia infection can occur by inhaling contaminated dust or via contamination of a wound with soil containing nocardia. Nocardiosis results in a positive AFB smear. Other bacteria that may have a positive AFB smear include these are some weird names. I apologize, guys. I haven't taken microbiology yet, but I'm actually signed up for it this semester, so just wait. I'm going to come back with a vengeance for these microbes, so don't even worry. Nocardiosis requires the use of standard precautions, and so this goes back to how is it transmitted and how are you able to pass this on to patients, okay? So it really comes down to, well, how can you get this, right? You're inhaling contaminated dust or via contamination of a wound with soil, right? So does this patient need to go, into airborne precautions? No, they do not, because the pathology of the disease does not require any type of isolation precautions. Okay, question 5. A 38-year-old woman being treated for breast cancer has a white blood cell count of 2.3. This is an improvement over the counts seen during the past 2 weeks. Her physician has been aggressive in treating every potential infection she has had. She is currently on an antibiotic for a BSI from Staphylococcus epidermidis. She now has a fever of 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit. What action should be taken? A. Her intravenous sites should be inspected frequently. B. None, because she may have neutropenic fever and no renal infection. C. More blood cultures because she may be developing fungal septicemia. And D. Antibiotics stopped because she may have a drug fever. Fever. So once again, try to break down the question. I know this one's a little bit more clinical focused, and this is going to be the part that's going to be difficult for epis who don't have a clinical background, right? This one's a little bit more of one of those difficult questions. So try to break down the question, and let me give you a couple of, like a minute or two to break it down. Okay, so this one's pretty diverse. We have a lot of different answers. We have some A's, some D's, some C's. So it's kind of a little bit, there's a lot of different opinions. So let's go into the explanation. So which actions should be taken? More blood cultures. So sepsis, staphylococci, and fungi is a leading cause of mortality in neutropenic cancer patients. Early initiation of effective causative therapy as well as an intensive adjunctive therapy is mandatory to improve outcome. Blood cultures as part of the usual microbiological workup remain the gold standard for the diagnosis of bacteremia. Right, and so as you can see, it's referencing chapter 23, which is one of the chapters you need to read for this week, and also chapter 44, which is infection prevention in oncology and other immunocompromised patients. Right. Can anyone tell me what neutropenia is? Because they're also not going to hold your hand on this test. They're expecting for you to be clinically savvy, and they're not going to, take the time to explain their medical jargon to you. And so that's why it's going to be challenging, but it's going to be fun. Okay. Yeah, so we have a lot of low neutrophils. That is correct. So it's an abnormally low count of a type of white blood cell, specifically neutrophils, right? Okay, so Oh, time's up. Okay, so time is up. Let me just jump to our, we had one more question and some other things to cover, but you know, unfortunately we were quite busy today with introductions. So let's talk about our action items for next week. So for next week, you're going to want to make sure that you read chapters 21, 22, and 23. Also, if you haven't done so already, please complete the book borrowing contract. And the last thing I need you guys to do is to take a practice exam. Ooh, why are you so difficult? To take a practice exam, the first practice exam from the Certification Study Guide 6th edition, and submit your answer sheets to me by the close of business on Wednesday. I would really recommend that you guys take the exam in a place that is quiet. So whether you decide to go to Panera or you decide to, you know, actually Panera is not that quiet, like the library or just anywhere where it's a little bit quiet and calm so that you're able to really think. And the reason why I want you guys to submit your answer sheets to me with, you know, once you've kind of crossed out the ones which are wrong, is because I want to understand as a group what areas I may need to focus more on in our sessions, because we do have, you know, a couple of people who may be nurses and a lot of us have our MPH, and so this is just to give me a better understanding of how I need to focus all of our education for our next upcoming meeting. So our next upcoming meeting is going to be really different. We're not going to have introductions, and we're going to dive straight into the material. And so I hope that today was kind of fun and relaxed and just giving you a little bit of an insight into what the next couple of weeks are going to be like. And if you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to email me or call me. And thank you so much for tuning in today, guys. Really appreciate it. Y'all have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.